Alright, so here we're going to be tying the articulated Kreelex. Got my hook in the vise, putting down a good thread base. Snip off the excess. I got my first set of material here in gold. I'm going to cut about 8 to 10 strands off on one side, fold that in half, cut that in half, and then take that piece that I've cut in half, fold it over again, snip that in half. Now we're going to make this 1.5 times the length of the hook shank. Just kind of eyeball it here. If you have a fly that you like, that you've tied, that you feel has a good length for the tail, I like to use that as a kind of a measurement. Yeah, it's a little long. Let's cut a little bit of that off. Alright, next we're going to take our second material. This is in silver. Same thing with the top material. Cut it in half, fold it over, sometimes these fibers are a little tricky, they get a little static. There we go. Okay, now we're going to be taking our polar chenille. I'll lay down my white first. And I got some yellow in this case. If I'm doing a two-tone Kreelex, I like to try to find a two-tone body. Match it as close as you can. Then we're just going to wind this up. Careful not to trap any fibers. So once you get to the end here, you do want to leave a little bit of room to tie in the front part of the flash. Nice thing about these are relatively cheap to tie. Got my polar chenille falling down. Here we go. Alright, so here we're going to be taking our bottom flash. Just going to be laying that on top, doing a 1, 2, 3, 4 wraps or so, but they have to be loose because then you're going to be taking your thumb and just kind of wiggling that around so that it encompasses about half the hook shank. Doesn't have to be perfect. Then we're going to take our other half, lay that on top, pinch, same thing, wiggle it around, pull it tight. Now we're going to take all those fibers and sweep them back, making sure that the top doesn't get trapped with the bottom, and then you can come over and comb it back. Making sure that the eye of the hook is clear. You can use UV glue here, super glue. Whoop. Alright, so there's the back half. Front part of the hook, or front hook rather. I got some wire in here, already tied on. Gonna throw another thread base down. Take my beads. You can use the 5 or 6 millimeter articulated beads, which is fine. I just prefer the smaller ones. So here, cut about a 3-inch length piece of the wire. What we're going to do is we're going to just kind of lightly capture it to kind of get the length that you want. And when the fibers are swept back on the top of the shank, they're going to cover all these beads, and they're going to actually allow it to swim pretty well in the water. This stuff doesn't really absorb water all that well, which is good. So it kind of hovers in the water. This is pretty good. Again, I like to have another fly that I like to match it up with, just in case. Yeah, that looks pretty good. All right, so get this folded over. You'll occasionally have too long of a piece of wire, so I'm just going to snip this off. Now be very careful because this wire is sharp, so you might cut your thread. Come a little ways down the shank, but make sure that you cover up all of the wire. All right, next we're going to take our silver. Same thing as we did in the back. All right, to find any pieces that are not snipped. Again, just make sure there's no stragglers when you're trying to fold it over on itself. Once again, I like to measure, kind of eyeball it. Flip it over. Same thing with the gold. what I'll do is I'll split the material in half as best I can and kind of form it around the hook. We do this on the front section because it just makes it swim a little better. Alright, so once again, got your puller chenille. And make sure you leave some room because you want this to wiggle back and forth, and I'll show you at the very end why. So I won't go up as far because I want to crowd the cone. Same thing with this, just throw down some wraps and kind of sweep back the fibers so there's no trapped. Doesn't have to be perfect, and you can even wrap this with a little bit of space between the wraps if you don't want it too thick. Okay. There we go. Take our final bit of flash. Same thing that we did in the back. Curve it over. Try to surround the hook. Same thing here. Once you're happy with how that looks, I'm going to sweep the fibers back here. And do a couple of whip finishes behind the cone. Try not to trap any fibers. So now you push the cone back, just like with a meat whistle. We're gonna start our thread. Lay down a couple of wraps to really thicken up the thread dam there. And yes, that is a lot of thread wraps, but you really don't want the thing to move. But that is the articulated Kreelex in silver and gold.